African Republic has become the second nation in the world, after El Salvador, of course, to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. The National Assembly has passed and the president has signed a bill drafted by the Ministry of Digital Economy. The country has a population of 4.83 million, and around 11% of that has access to the internet. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. But after El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender less than a year ago, there was this big expectation, right, that other countries would follow, because a lot of countries expressed the interest to do so. But that hasn't really been the case. The rush has sort of calmed, and countries have been, I imagine, watching El Salvador closely. And but here we are with a second country. So I'm going to toss it to you guys. What do you think of this, and what should we expect? Adam, I see you smiling, so I'm going to go with you first.
I mean, so El Salvador making this move last year was almost more ideological than it was, something that was going to have a short-term impact. And certainly many commenters, myself included, looked at that and said, this is something that we're likely to see repeated. But there's another part to that. That other part to that is we're likely to see repeated, assuming that it goes well, right? With these types of big moves, there's a lot of risk that comes into play just because nobody's ever done anything like this before. So when you're looking at a country, especially a country that doesn't really benefit from the existing system, well, we've seen how El Salvador has been treated in terms of how the IMF has communicated about them, how the World Bank has communicated about them. There are right now two pieces of legislation with bipartisan support making their way through the House and Senate that will have within the U.S. that will have the U.S. conducting a study on the financial impact of El Salvador's move to the U.S. economy, which is sort of a funny thing because the U.S. economy is one that's, of course, measured in the trillions of dollars, and the El Salvadorian economy is measured in the tens of billions of dollars. So we're talking about a very, very small country that the U.S. in a bipartisan fashion at a time like this, when there's so many other things to be worrying about, is thinking about seriously. So I think it's interesting, honestly. I was not expecting anyone to follow until we had a little bit more finality. And I think the fact that we are seeing this, and especially out of Africa, which is, I think, not a place, not a continent that we expected to see this. I was expecting this more from South America, maybe some Asian nations. So I think it's a very interesting move. I haven't had a chance to read the bill yet, and I think that that's really where a lot more information about this will come out. What did they actually pass? Because there's a lot of ways that you could do this. And I think that, again, until we get our eyes on that, I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to review it yet. We're really not going to know exactly what they did outside of kind of this headline figure. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised to see this come out of Africa. So I used to live in South Africa. I know South Africa as a tiny, very westernized part of the African continent. But when I lived there, I was a journalist and I observed a really advanced adoption of fintech, more so than in North America. And there was a real use case for peer-to-peer transactions. There wasn't really a barrier when it came to mobile phones and internet access, and products like M-Pesa were really, really taking off in villages where maybe they didn't have access to the traditional banking system. So there's been innovation in this space happening a lot in Africa. What I zeroed in on here, it was that 11% of the population have access to mobile devices with an internet connection here. So not only is there a technology barrier, but what that tells me is there is also an access to information barrier, right? If we don't have access to the internet, how do we do our own research? How do we educate ourselves about this new technology that maybe we don't have a lot of information about? And so I wonder what the government is going to do to help bridge that. I hope that we see some infrastructure set up, more affordable data set up there. So I look forward to seeing that. I think about when El Salvador launched, and there was a real light shone on the actual legislation. And I also haven't had a chance to read the legislation that came out of this, but there was that one piece that said every single business in El Salvador must accept Bitcoin. And that was a really polarizing topic. And then we saw the Salvadoran president kind of roll that back in a series of tweets. It was never actually rolled back in the legislation. And so I hope that we see some learnings come out of that. And I hope that we can see something different happen here, something that's a little bit more positive, so that the next iteration is a step towards kind of a future that can make this work. But Sandali, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, just to add to what you said about this coming out of Africa, something that stood out to me was a quote from the finance minister who said, "There's a common narrative that sub-Saharan African countries are often one step behind when it comes to adapting new technology. This time we can actually say that our country is one step ahead." And this is really interesting to me, because they chose making Bitcoin legal tender as the way to show the world that they're adapting new technology, which was an interesting move considering, like you said, 11% of its population has access to the internet. And another thing is that, I mean, how is this all going to look, right? Like, I don't know. It just like, yeah, Adam, I lost my train of thought there, but like, how is this gonna pan out, right? It's just like a mess waiting to happen, in my opinion. I'm sorry for the strong language on that, but yeah, I'm just curious. Sorry,
strong language.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I think we're all wondering about that.
Skeptical.
So we'll be moving on to the next story in just a second, but I think that one thing that's interesting about this that we haven't really heard anything about yet, but which we may, and I'll be watching very closely, is El Salvador did what they did. And in part, what that gave them was a lot of attention from the cryptocurrency and specifically the Bitcoin community, and a lot of development, a lot of investment, a lot of companies opening offices. All of that stuff happened to help the government build out the infrastructure in order to do that. That could be, I mean, that 11% penetration that you're talking about, Jen, that could actually be seen as an opportunity for companies to go in and to actually help the government to roll out these services. And again, if we see something like that, then I think that may be a reason beyond anything else. Is just that this could spur adoption in the Central African Republic in a way that, lacking something like this, there isn't really a reason for people in the cryptocurrency community to make those types of investments. And certainly the cryptocurrency community is looking for use cases and looking for places to really try out a lot of these ideas. So I think it could, again, we're reading minds here at this point, but I think that's an interesting dynamic that we'll be watching to see if it develops over time.